Great. Yes, this is on. Great. Welcome to the first night of Vision. This is so fun. Thank you to Northern Lights who were just singing. They were incredible. Absolutely incredible.
So good. Now, from all of us here at Durham Christian Union, we just want to offer you a really warm welcome. And it's great to have you here. Now, many of you are probably wondering what Vision is. Well, Vision is a week of events centered on the person of Jesus Christ. Now, as a way of introduction, I'm Luke. I'm a second-year criminologist at Mary's.
And I'm Lou, a second-year sociologist at Grey, and we are your hosts for this evening.
Yep, the tent's going to be here all week. We've got lunch bars, international cafe talks, and these evening events. So there's plenty to get stuck into.
Yeah, and there'll be live music every single evening with a talk and an interview, so there's so much to be excited about. Tonight's talk is, Are We on Our Own in the World? For me personally, growing up, not going to church, I remember a time where I didn't know God, but I know there was never a time where he didn't know me, and I can see that reflecting back on life. So it's a really exciting talk to be part of.
Yeah, now I don't know what your vision of reality looks like, but in a few minutes we're going to have Hamish, our speaker, come up and interview Poppy, a third-year student here, about what her life looked like before she knew Jesus and what her life looks like now.
Yeah, and in the evenings this week, we'll be looking at the book of John, and all the readings can be found in your magazines that have been placed on your chairs, or on the Vision app, which you can access via the QR code near the beginning of the magazine. There's so many answers to this question, but we'll be looking at what God's answer is in the book of the Bible, which is what we believe to be God's word.
Now, just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. In the event of the fire, your fire exits are here, here, and through the back of the cafe, either side. If you need the toilet, just dip out into the cafe and out round the side. The toilets are out there. And if for any reason you require first aid, just look to one of the stewards.
Yeah, but with that out of the way, we're going to invite our speaker, Hamish, up onto the stage.
Great.
Where do you want me?
Great. Hamish, it's great to have you here, and you were chatting to us earlier about being an ex-Durham student yourself, and we were just wondering, what are your reflections on being a student in Durham?
Oh, reflections on being a student in Durham. Yeah, evening all. I was a student at Cuths, at St Cuthbert's Society. Yeah, look at that, a few Cuths. Better cheers than for Grey and Mary's. I'm very pleased with that. Well done, you guys down there. Reflections on being a student in Durham. Like, how did I find it?
Yeah.
I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I was one of the very few who came down to Durham, despite no accent at all. I'm from Scotland. About an hour northwest of Edinburgh is home for me. So I was surprised on one level to find myself surrounded by so many folk from the south who were stunned to learn there was a whole country further north than Durham. I know that those of you from Guildford, it's hard to imagine that. I was also surprised and reassured that everyone else, it seemed like me, had been rejected from either Oxford or Cambridge. So that was good. Although one bad moment came when I met a guy who'd been rejected from Cambridge, and I was like, oh, great. And are you now doing that usual thing of saying, I'm really glad that happened? And his face fell, and he said, no, I deferred and applied to Oxford, and they rejected me as well. So, yeah, brutal. So there might be someone here in that boat, but yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Me and Luke were discussing earlier, what is the most outrageous thing that you did as a student at Durham?
The problem is, you're asking a Cuths rugby boy that question, and certainly Cuths doesn't have the greatest track record. I think... can it be something I was involved in rather than something I did?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, fine. So, I want you to actually listen to something I say this evening. No, we went on a rugby tour to North America, and we toured around the Ivy Leagues, so Princeton, Harvard, Yale. It was an amazing tour for a college rugby team, but we were in Princeton. Princeton's a beautiful place if you've ever been there, crazily privileged university, and we went out to one of the sort of student clubs, and we were all there in our kind of tour ties and blazers, and a number of Americans love English accents, so it was a relaxed evening. At the same time, their American football team was having a social on the other side of the dance floor of the club, and our scrum half, anyone play rugby out of interest? A few. If you're a scrum half, you'll know yourself that you're quite a sort of yappy character. He was a social time bomb. So at some point in an evening, he would just go off. And he was standing on the bar. He was standing on the bar, actually. He was drinking. And he saw a girl he thought looked rather pretty on the other side of the room. And so he said, right, boys, I'm going in. He drained his drink, went sort of Saturday Night Live across the dance floor, kissed her, and just boogied back. Now, it's terrible behavior. I'm genuinely not condoning it. Nor was what turned out to be the young lady's boyfriend, who played for the American football team. And he came over, and it was like something now out of a high school movie, but I tell you no word of a lie. He said, "Did you just kiss my girl?" And my mate, whose nickname was Toff, and it was an accurate description, he ended up being an officer in the army, terrifyingly. He said, "Yes, and she liked it." At which point, American footballer lamped him, like properly hit him. At which point, all my mates piled in to the American football mates. So you had Blazers on one side, Letterman jackets on the other, having basically a scrum in the middle of the dance floor. I was on tour as the token sober guy, so I basically thought this has to end. So I went in, picked up Toff, because he was only a little chap, and carried him out, with him yelling over my shoulder, pouring blood, "She still liked it." And then the police were called, and the night ended.
Amazing.
There we are.
Bombshell.
Oh, man.
With that bombshell, we're going to hand over to you and Poppy now.
Okay, yeah. It's a seamless segue from an uncivilized moment to a very civilized person. I'd love to invite Poppy Metherell to join me up on the stage. I'm a bit blinded by the light. Here's Poppy. Let's give Poppy a hand if we would. Hey, Poppy, grab a seat. We need the mic. Poppy has many qualities, but a massive voice might... Oh. She doesn't need two mics, though. Right. Great. Poppy, good evening. It's lovely to have you here.
Hello.
Now, for those who don't know Poppy, Poppy is a third-year theology student studying at Hatfield, so it's lovely to have you here. Yes, well, we've got to have some Hatfield pride. It's very good. Poppy, just to get us going, if you were in one college other than Hatfield, and I know it's hard for a Hatfield person to imagine such a thing,
Yeah.
which college would it be?
I think it would probably have to be Hillbead, given that my brother is there and my sister's going there. So
Okay.
yeah.
That's a political answer. That's
Yeah.
very good. All right, so Hillbeaders, you can be happy. Now, Poppy, tell us just a little bit what early life was like for you. Tell us a bit about growing up, your childhood, those sorts of things. Give us a sense for that part of your life.
So I grew up in London. I've got two siblings, a brother who is in his second year at Durham and a sister who's coming to Durham next year. Really happy childhood, lots of sport, lots of time together.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was have you got a dominant memory, like best holiday as a family or anything like that? Any things that stand out from those days?
I just remember most weekends my parents being like, right, go out, amuse yourselves. And we go out and just spend like all day building a den in the wood.
Nice.
And just, I don't know how it kept us amused for so long.
Nice,
But,
that's ideal. Now we're thinking this evening about this idea of a vision for reality. And as the guys were saying, we'll be looking at what one of the eyewitness accounts of Jesus says about that question. Now, I know when you're a 5-year-old, you don't think in terms of a vision of reality. But as you were growing up, what was your sense of questions to do with God, Christianity? What did you make of this Christian stuff that now would be a big part of your life?
Yeah. So my family aren't Christian, but we'd go to church on Christmas Day as a kind of traditional thing. And I think I had a concept that there was a God, but not in any kind of personal way. If someone had asked me, I probably would have said I'm a Christian because I knew the Lord's Prayer. And occasionally at school in RE lessons, they'd talk about it. I thought it was just being a nice person, trying to be.
Yeah. And specifically, did questions about the person of Jesus Christ, did he enter into your consciousness at all in any way?
Not really at all, actually, apart from like the nativity scene. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Now, you had a happy childhood. I know that when we were talking earlier, you were talking about how when it came to school life, from a very young age, you were very driven, quite sort of perfectionistic, I think was the word that you used. If I suppose no one here really knows you brilliantly, some will, but not masses. Give us a sense for what you were like as a schoolgirl.
Probably one of those really annoying people, actually, who just tried to throw themselves into everything with everyone else being like, stop, it's just, you don't have time.
And did you do well at the things you threw yourself into?
No, not everything.
Because people who do that are really annoying.
Yeah, they really are annoying.
Okay.
No, I signed up for loads of things which I definitely shouldn't have signed up for, like swimming. I couldn't swim. But yeah.
I mean, annoying's not quite the word for that. That's,
And
there are other things
painful,
we
I
could say.
think.
Well, yeah, possibly.
Yeah, spent a lot of time at school throwing myself into sport, music. I actually really enjoyed the academic side as well, in quite a nerdy way, probably.
Okay. So, are you a Harry Potter fan?
Yes.
Yes. If you were a Harry Potter character, which character would you be?
Probably Hermione.
Probably Hermione. Okay, we were hearing that. Any other Hermiones in the room? Oh. Hermione's great. Not much love for Hermione there. There we are. Okay, maybe she was at Hatfield too. You never know. So, you mentioned earlier, and you've said that you were a perfectionist, that you threw yourself into stuff, whether you could swim or not. How particularly did that show itself for you in your attitude to those formative years? You know, for lots of, well, you guys, I suppose not true for me, school years are very recent. So I suppose I'm looking at the broad brushstroke now. What was that experience of who you were like?
Yeah, I think I massively thought I was defined by everything I did, which created quite a kind of endless cycle of trying to push myself to be the best at everything I put my mind to, which would play out in one of two ways. Either I'd kind of achieve what I set out to, but then the goalpost would move immediately, and that kind of cycle would begin again. Or I'd fail at it and be left with a really crippling sense of kind of failure and worthlessness.
So there's, I mean, pretty two big extremes.
Yeah.
And yet actually at heart, they're not far apart in some ways, because you're saying you were never really there. You weren't finding what you were looking for.
Yeah, it was a kind of endless cycle, I think.
And where did that lead you in yourself? Like, how did that affect the way you thought, the way you felt, even your health? Like, tell us a little bit about the effects.
I think for a long time it was fine. It was kind of ticking over. And then it kind of really came to a crunch post-GCSEs when I did well for me, but didn't get straight A stars as lots of my friends did. And that sent me, I remember going back in my first year of sixth form and being like, well, I've got to prove to everyone that I'm not a failure. And that kind of meant that I was working ridiculous hours. I'd take 10 minutes off for lunch each day. I'd be up before all my friends. I'd go to the gym first, then do my music practice before meeting them at breakfast, which basically just ended up in me having a bit of a breakdown, because that's not a sustainable way of life in any way.
No, and this was at, what, 16, 17?
Yeah, 16, 17. Yeah.
Okay, and did you ever think, or did anyone ever suggest to you that there might be a better way of ordering your world than that? Because in some ways, even if you didn't have it, that's a vision of reality that's shaping the way you were living. Did you see any other way that there could be?
Not really with the concept of God, because he was still such a kind of abstract figure to me at that point. I mean, friends would often say to me, like, can't you see that this isn't healthy?
Yeah.
But not kind of with that perspective.
Okay. Now, you're obviously, you're sitting here saying this as someone who now has a very different vision of the world than you did then. You're saying this is a follower of Jesus Christ, so there's no big sort of spoiler in that for us listening on. Could you tell us, though, about what changed? Because you're clearly in a pretty locked-in pattern from what you're saying at school. What was it that started bringing you to the point you're at now?
So when I was 16, I went on a Christian summer camp. Basically, all my friends, well, a lot of my friends were going, and the ones I had been before had said, oh, it's just a week of sport. I was like, great, sounds good, count me in. And it was there for the first time that the Bible was opened, and there was a series of talks, morning and evening, about who Jesus was. And yeah, through looking at his word and hearing these talks, I saw from the Bible that Jesus really was the Son of God, that he'd come into this world, the perfect world that God had created, and that we had messed up, to save us from a really kind of bad place that we were in, distant from God, living our life in rebellion to him. And that actually, out of his incomprehensible mercy, he sent his son Jesus to die on the cross for us so that we might have life in his name. And I think through hearing that and being confident that that was true, I saw that my biggest problem wasn't not getting the top exam results or getting into the top sports team. My biggest problem was how far short I was falling of God, and the way I was living my life in rebellion to him.
And I mean, it's striking listening to that, because I suppose you're articulating a major change in how you viewed everything in some ways, rather than merely try harder and fail. You're saying actually it wasn't just you, it's in relation to God. I mean, could you talk us through a little bit about why do you think, as you reflect on that, that so gripped you? What new lenses did you have in order to see things that way?
Yeah, I think reading the Bible, you see just how good God is. And that concept of good isn't kind of down here with our understanding of good. It's so far beyond that. And the more you see just how good he is and perfect he is, actually you realise more and more how broken we are, and how far short we're falling of that goodness. And how much, therefore, we're actually never going to succeed without God's grace and mercy in sending Jesus.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just where you're finishing there talking about Jesus, you know, when we were talking earlier, you were saying very much it was seeing more of him that helped you to understand your own scenario. I mean, what was it that you found so compelling about this guy who lived 2,000 years ago? You know, why was that so real and so believable to you, do you think?
Yeah, I think we can be so confident that he is the Son of God. We see that in the Bible, but and if we know that, then how humbling it was that he came to earth to save us from destruction and judgment. And if we really understand that, then how much we should be living our lives in accordance with that and in accordance with his will, and not for ourselves.
Yeah, so you started really viewing reality on God's terms in that sense,
massively.
rather than yourself. How then did that start changing you? I suppose we're sort of moving up to the last few years to the present day. That shift in a worldview, and we said at lunchtime that there'll be lots of different people with loads of different views on these questions here in the room, and we just rejoice at that. As Luke was saying, it's great to have so many worldviews represented. But for a Christian person who's put Jesus, or who has had him put at the center, how has that started shaping the way you view the world?
I think initially, so I left camp that first summer and went back to family that weren't Christian and school where there weren't many Christians. And so even though I was really confident of those truths, I didn't really know what it looked like to live as a Christian. And so for the next kind of 3 years, I think I was really living in a kind of constant battle of knowing that I probably should be living more in accordance with what God wanted, but not actually knowing what that looked like, and still very much kind of trying to live the way that the rest of my friends were living. And so, yeah, to begin with, it was very much that kind of constant battle. And then,
can I just leap in there and just ask, why do you think there was that sort of gap almost between what you believed to be true and how you were living? If you wouldn't mind just giving a bit of light on that.
Well, I think the major problem was that I wasn't reading the Bible. I wasn't stuck in church. And it's, through the Bible that we see exactly who God is. And the more we understand him and, the enormity of what happened at the cross with Jesus, the more we understand how we should be living. And also in a practical sense as well, there are clear ways in which that we should be living for Jesus. So on my year off, when I did start reading the Bible, I think that gap started to close slightly but that doesn't mean to say I don't get it wrong. A lot now.
Absolutely. And if you weren't with us for lunch today, I'd encourage you, when the recording goes up, to try and listen to our lunchtime speaker, Sam, reflecting on just a little bit of what Poppy's talking about there, that sort of the good value of having people around you who can help you to view the world this way. I interrupted you, actually. You were going to be carrying on and narrating kind of the change in you. So do pick that back up again, if you can remember what you were saying. No, that's fine. Let me ask you, particularly today, not just today, but looking back now at your 2.5 years in Durham, what differences can you see in Poppy now as opposed to Poppy back then? Like, what have been the concrete changes for you?
Yeah, so I'm still playing a lot of sport and doing a lot of music. I'm working sometimes. But I think the real difference is that I'm no longer doing it for myself. And it's such a joy knowing that I'm able to do those things because it's a gift from God. And the joy of knowing that and being able to use those gifts for His glory is also the most freeing thing, because I know that if I mess up, it ultimately doesn't matter. That I can still enjoy them, but that it's not what defines me. My identity is in Christ as a child of God, and that is what I've got my eyes fixed on. I've got my eyes fixed on the hope of eternal life, and the complete confidence in that as well, and not in this life.
Okay, so let me just press you a little bit, if that's okay. We talked earlier about your perfectionism and the place that brought you to. I imagine those tendencies don't just vanish. The smile suggests that that's the case. How then does what you've just been speaking so movingly about of a new identity, how does that connect very specifically with that sort of question of perfectionism? What does that look like for you when you're tempted to go back to that sort of quite dark place of looking at yourself rather than Jesus?
I think it is really tempting to always try and look back, and that kind of those qualities in many ways are something that I still battle with. But I think when I do get to that point, it's just reminding myself that my biggest problem is not kind of being trapped in that cycle. My biggest problem was my relationship with God. And therefore, because I put my trust in Him now and can be so confident that that has been dealt with, actually, how much more should my life be kind of living in thanksgiving to that?
Okay.
And I think reminding myself of that makes it, so much easier to kind of take my eyes kind of off the floor and of myself and to realign them to heaven.
Okay. Thank you, and thanks for being so open about that. I mean, conscious that that's going quite deep into yourself in that way, but hopefully, that there'll be folk who resonate with that. I know I work in a university context up in St Andrews. A lot of people really wrestle with that question of who am I and how do I view myself in light of this world we live in. So if there are things that, as you listen to Poppy, you're finding are resonating with you, please come and grab her afterwards. I'm sure she'd be happy to chat. And certainly,
Absolutely.
As we work through John's gospel this evening and over this week, we'll be picking up some of these things. I want to just flip it around a little bit, though. You've talked a lot this evening, and we're moving to a close, so you can relax and be relieved. You talked about how your worldview, your whole vision of reality was changed by Jesus, and you referred a lot to how you were persuaded of that through the Bible. Now, there'll be plenty here this evening, I guess, who may well say to you, hang on, how can you trust that? How can you be so confident? Because you do sound confident. Particularly, as a third-year theology student who's grappled with lots of these sorts of big questions in loads of different views. What would you say to someone who was saying afterwards, "See, Poppy, come on, it's great for you, but how can you be so confident that it's true?"
And I think, studying theology, we're presented with different arguments for the reason why God doesn't exist in pretty much every lecture. But for me, I found that at some point in all of those, the reason runs out, and there's still a gap. Whereas the claims of the Bible and the person of Jesus, which we know we can be confident of not just from the Bible, but from other historical sources as well. And if we can be confident of him as a figure, I think we can be confident that he did die on the cross and that he really did rise. For me, the reason has never run out in the way that it has with other arguments.
And so in that sense, if it's true and
Absolutely.
Can stand up to that sort of testing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's just worth saying, if you've got that particular question about the Bible, we're really conscious as Christians that it can sound really weird to say, look, this is God's word and we believe it's trustworthy. There's going to be an afternoon session in the cafe through the back where we just dig into some of those questions, look at some of the history, some of the theology behind it, and just talk to each other. So if you'd like to join in with that, keep your eye on the social media feeds, and information will be coming out about where that is. Poppy, last question for you as we close. In view of the changes that have happened in you, in view of the way you live now, what might you say to Poppy 6 or 7 years ago? Or in that sense, what might you say to someone here tonight who's feeling trapped in that sort of cycle of me at the center, of self at the center? What sort of advice might you give?
Knowing God is the best thing that there is. And I really would just say to anyone who's sitting here tonight that hasn't opened the Bible, please do. It's the single best decision that I ever have made and ever will make. I'd really love everyone to have that opportunity too. Okay,
brilliant. Look, thanks, Poppy, for being so honest. It takes a lot of courage to come and sit on the stage, to talk to your peers, to bear yourself in this way. So can we say thanks to Poppy and give her a hand? Thanks very much, Poppy. All right, head on down. Do you want to let me take the mic? Poppy, let me take the mic. Thank you. There you go.
Yeah, that was really, really great to hear from Poppy. As Hamish and Poppy said, if you've got any questions or you want to chat to Poppy afterwards, please do just grab her after the talk. She'd really love to speak to you. Now we're just going to watch a short video on the Bible passage that Hamish is going to be speaking from tonight. You can also find that in your magazines under Evening One, the Bible passage. And yeah, after that, Hamish is going to come up and speak. So enjoy.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. To all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known.
Great, well, evening again. Thank you so much from the whole of the Durham Christian Union here for the fact that you've given up your evening to join us this evening. It means a lot, and we really hope that not only it's a fun evening for you, and Northern Lights were brilliant, and Poppy was so honest and open, we hope that there is something interesting for you here as well tonight. And actually, I hope that there's going to be something more than merely interesting, that the great conviction of those in this room who would believe in Jesus Christ is that the news about him, that the message about Jesus is something that truly does reshape our vision of reality. That actually doesn't just reshape it, that it sets it. But at the start of a week like this, and I'm very conscious that I don't know you, in fact I can barely see you because of the lights in my eyes, I'd love to, with all the privilege of anonymity, ask you a personal question. It's a big one in some ways. I'd invite you to mull on it now and then to keep it in your mind as we keep on working through this evening, and I sincerely hope over the week, if you're able to join us over the whole of this Vision Week. It's this: how do you view the world? How do you view the world? It's not meant to be a sort of first-year philosophy lecture question. It really is trying to grapple with something that I want to suggest every single one of us needs to answer. Whether you're someone here tonight who is a Christian person, whether you're someone who is a follower of another one of the great world religions, whether you're someone who has no religion whatsoever but would be spiritual, would say that there's more to the world than what we can see. If you're someone here tonight who would be an atheist, who would say, no, there is no God, or a secular materialist who might say that all we are and all we have is all that we're made of, that, we're just matter banging around together. Wherever you sit on that broad spectrum, how you view the world is of crucial importance. It'll be shaping now, whether you know it or not, how you love people, how you live with people. It will be contouring your map for the future. It will be laying out for you in so many ways, seen and unseen, visible, invisible, tangible and intangible. It'll be laying out for you the choices you're going to be making. And I hope you can see, therefore, that this vision of reality, whatever it is actually a really important one to think about, to interrogate, and to ask ourselves questions of. There are loads of different ways that we might view the world. One that is really popular, I suppose, is that this world really is all that there is. And I suppose wherever we are on that spectrum, many folk here this evening will be saying, well, even if we don't know about the questions of God and who Jesus is, we would say that this life is what we've got. This is the one shot that we have. And this world we live on is it. That actually this is as good as it's going to get. I hope that on the screen behind me, a famous picture is going to appear, one that has been called over the years a pale blue dot. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to ask you to use your imaginations. But I'm sincerely hoping that it will emerge. It is coming. Great. I'm being given a sign. You may have heard of Carl Sagan, a famous scientist, astronomer, and also a science fiction author. He was very interested in the mission of the Voyager spaceship. That's not him. That's the picture I'm looking for. Great. The Voyager spaceship was something that in 1990 was leaving our own sort of planetary neighborhood for the very edge of the solar system. It was about to pass, therefore, into deep interstellar space. And Sagan persuaded the engineers running the mission in NASA to turn the cameras of the probe backwards to take a last look at our home. I wonder if you can see it. I'll take a stroll. You might be able on the big screen to see just here, this little tiny dot in the midst of this band of dust and light. That is our home planet. That is Earth, viewed from about 6.4 billion kilometers away. 32 degrees above the ecliptic plane, whatever that means. Physicists can explain that to me later. I'm a mere historian. And that is the picture that it captured. I want to read out to you what Carl Sagan said about it, because I think it captures for many their vision of reality of how this world is. Here's the voice from down the years. Look again at that dot, 0.12 pixel in size, for those who are interested in pixels. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering. Thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines. Every person who ever lived, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Here's where he starts unpacking that for what it means of how we view ourselves. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. And here's the punchline. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. It's powerful, isn't it? It's quite stirring. I also want to suggest that, if true, it's very, very bleak. I love how Sagan and those who would follow after him have captured that this world we live on is a theatre for not only enormous human joys, but terrible human sufferings. That this dot is the arena of man's inhumanity to man, as it were, of our predations on this blue dot, and of our treatment of one another. And he acknowledges that we are in the dark. And yet the conclusion is depressing, isn't it? There is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. Now, the reason I want to begin with this quote from Carl Sagan is not only to ask the question of you and of me as to how we view reality, but to say that this vision is one that runs counter to the vision that is held out in these little booklets that are found on your seat. It's just an eyewitness account of Jesus' life from a guy called John. It's there in the magazine that Luke and Lou were talking about as well. Because what John insists on, and that's the passage we're going to look at this evening, he insists that actually help has come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. That yes, we are in need of that salvation, as Carl Sagan would say, but that it is not found in embracing the despair of the cosmic dark, but actually it is found in the person and work of Jesus Christ. And the invitation to anyone here this evening, wherever you are on that spectrum I outlined at the start, the invitation is to listen in, to see what you make of it, to not only question your vision of reality, to not only question the claims of Christianity, and I hope you do that. I hope that if you come with a friend, you ask them questions, that you may find Poppy afterwards and ask her some of the things that she has gone through herself. You know, be inquisitive and be skeptical, but I hope too that you would deploy exactly those tools, whether you're studying anthropology or whether you're ancient history, whether it's engineering or nuclear physics, whatever you are, whoever you are, I hope that you will take seriously, even in this week, the claims that actually there is a vision of reality radically different to the one that says this is all there is. We're going to just work through the first page of this account. So if you would and you'd humor me, please turn to it, either in one of these little booklets or just find the right page in the magazine in front of you if the lights are enough for you to read. It was the video that was played to us, the reading. It may well be familiar to you from carol services. But you may have noticed something striking. The way that John, our writer, all those years ago, writing sometime around the end of the 1st century AD, within a lifetime of Jesus' own life and death, he begins in a really arresting way. In the beginning was the Word. In the beginning, it's not like Star Wars. I don't know how many of you went to the cinema and were disappointed by the last Star Wars installment, but you know that the famous start to the Star Wars movies a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, this stuff happened. John says, no. It's not in a galaxy far, far away. And though it's a long time ago, it's rooted in our world. In the beginning, if you were reading this with a 1st century set of ears on, would take you right back to the very first words of the whole of the Jewish scriptures. The point at which God speaks everything into existence in the beginning. And John roots it in this world. He's basically saying to his readers then, and us 2,000 years later, listen up. Here is news about your reality. Here's news about my reality. Here is news about that pale blue dot. Because in the beginning of this world, something happened. In the beginning, John says, was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John is persuaded, and he thinks it's so important that he starts his account this way, that there is something more ultimate than our world. And I just want to gently ask the question together tonight, could that be true? Could it be true? You know, I don't want to be naive. John speaks of a God who made all things. He talks about a God who from the very beginning was personal. Do you see that if you look down at little number 1 and 2 again? The Word was with God and the Word was God. This Word is a person. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. You know, John says that every single thing about us, who we are, the hairs on our head, and mine are decreasing rapidly as the years go on, our personalities, our characteristics, our loves, our hopes, our dreams, our joys, our sorrows, those are made by God. They reflect something about him. Just even now, actually, in this tent, listen to the sound of your own breath. Feel your chest rise and go down again. You know, John's assumption and claim is that God gives you that breath, that we have nothing without him. But I don't want to be naive. Lots and lots of people really struggle with that claim, don't they? You may say, hang on, how on earth can you talk about a God in the face of suffering? Please come back on Wednesday evening when we consider that. You may say, how on earth can you talk about God in the face of the scientific advances of our 20th and 21st centuries? How can you talk about God as confidently as Poppy did, based on a 2,000-year-old text written by a person with his own flaws and foibles? So there might be any number of reasons why anyone in this tent might reject the assumption that John makes. But gently and with respect, could it not be true that there is a God who made all things? You know, it wasn't shocking for John in his world to say that God made us. But it is in ours, isn't it? The dominant view of reality is the one articulated by Carl Sagan. That this life is it. And whether that leads you to radical pessimism or to optimism, it's got a deep hold, I think, on many of us. I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to try not to hurt anyone, and I'm going to provide for my family, and I'm going to build my home, and I'm going to have my life, and we'll go on holidays, and whatever your vision of the good life is, and then the grave, and then nothing. And yet think of what it means to be human. Think of the sweep of experience and joy and of deep meaning that is encompassed simply by those words. Through him all things were made. You know, we are creatures who are moral, aren't we? We believe instinctively in a right and a wrong. And if you don't, I'd love to talk to you afterwards and hear why and how. Because deep in our guts, there are certain things we see in our world and we just go, no. But why do we have that? Who are we in our moment in history on a pale blue dot, if that's all there is to say there's anything to do with right and wrong, that there can be such a category as good or evil? How on earth could we do that if there were no God? Why do we have a hardwired appreciation for beauty, however we define beauty in whatever culture we come from? Why are we drawn to that which is lovely? And why are we repelled by that which is ugly so often? Again, surely it's arbitrary and weak, if there's no God, to talk in such absolute fluffy terms, is it not? We could go on. Think about desire. Why do we have desires? Why do we have the appetites that we have, the affections that we have? Why are we creatures who strive for something, whatever that may be? What's the point? Genetic replication, even though in a wee while not even those whom we have genetically replicated will remember our names? Why do we have those desires if we have not been made by God? What about intimacy? Relationship, face-to-face communion with those who know us and who love us. It's just chemicals sloshing around in our brain. If this is all there is, where does that come from if not from a personal God? Now, I'm really conscious that none of these are what we might call proofs for the existence of God. None of them are proofs for the claim John is making on the biggest possible cosmic canvas. But add them all together, and I want to suggest that they are clues. And we've not even gone into the sort of philosophical grounds that I'd cheerfully do so afterwards if you'd like. but clues that point towards one who has made us from outside and in whose image we live and move and have our being. The writer C.S. Lewis, which was the next image in the slideshow, put his reflections on these things in this way. It's a wee bit dense, but chew on it. Because he's someone who came, like Poppy, from a position of apathy towards God. In fact, a position of hostility towards God. He described himself as the most reluctant convert in all of Christendom. He came to a position through this of saying that there is a God who sets reality. He said these things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, all of these things that we long for, are good images of what we really desire. For they are not the thing itself. They are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited. Put up all that we are, and actually the biblical account that there is a God who made us, that there is a God who loves us, that there is a God who wants that face-to-face relationship with us. Put it all together, and that suddenly starts sounding plausible. But look, you've not been invited to a marquee on a slightly kind of cold night in Durham just to be given hints and clues and things that sound as nebulous as the clouds outside. But that is not all that John said. That's just his first few verses. And if you fear that we're going to take that long to work through the rest, let me calm you down. We're not going to. We're going to pick up pace as we move now. Because John says that all that we are, all that we long for, and all of the mess that we've made of this world, Poppy used the language of sin, all of the ways in which we reject God and damage one another and break the world in which we find ourselves, all of the things that God says no to, find themselves drawn together, not in abstract principles, but in a person. Someone, in fact, more beautiful than our hopes could imagine. Someone more glorious than we can possibly conceive of. I mentioned just there in passing that I think one of the basic things about us is that we long for intimacy. We long for relationship. And do come back tomorrow evening. Sam Albury, our lunchtime speaker, is going to be speaking of the part that played in his own life, both before and after he became a Christian. But that intimacy so often goes wrong, doesn't it? We look for it in the place where people might hurt us. We find it in places that actually ultimately rebound back on us. We're constantly looking for answers to the question of who am I in relation to others, and we're constantly going away disappointed. I don't know how many of you have heard of the American novelist Walker Percy. He was a guy who had all sorts of conflicted thoughts about spirituality. He wrote this, a book I read just after Christmas, Lost in the Cosmos. He said, the only alien in the cosmos is the human self. Because it's only us who ask, who am I? And it's only us who are unable to answer. And yet the answer is given in this word, who was God. If you'd come back with me to John's Gospel, that would be great. And you can see how John continues. Verse 4, he says, about this eternal word, in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. You could jump down with your eyes to the bottom of the page, verse 14. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. You see, while we can't speak of the proof of God in some sort of rationalist vacuum or in hardcore scientific terms, we can with confidence speak of evidence for God in the person of Jesus Christ. The world-altering, world-changing claim of this page of writing, if it's true, is that the God who made all things, the God who made me, sense of humor that he has, the God who made you, good taste that he has, the God who is there, he stepped into our world. That he has come from outside, as it were, to save us, to know us, to be with us. The Word became flesh was a line that shattered people's worldviews 2,000 years ago. and still does today. That the God who is infinite, in the words of one poet, was contracted to a span, to the width of a hand. I met a 9-week-old baby earlier today, and I could hold him, not that I did because his mum would have killed me, but I could hold him in the palm of my hand. Imagine the God who made those billions upon billions of light years of galaxy becoming like us. Now, you may say, come on, Christian Christmas pie in the sky stuff. There's no evidence for it. But you know there is. This book is nothing less than a historical source testifying to these claims. There's 3 others in the Gospels. There's a 5th in the book of 1 Corinthians, the earliest manuscript New Testament document that we have. 5 primary documentary sources making the same basic claim that God himself got involved in human history and that he got involved for us. Because the claim of Christianity is that this someone, the Son of God, Jesus Christ, eternally divine, becoming fully human, that he came as us. He came in our form. He came with our emotions. He came with all that we are. Jesus wept. We'll see that on Wednesday night in chapter 11 of this gospel. Jesus laughed. Jesus knew what it was to have anger and sadness, to have joy and sorrow. He came and knew the fullest of the human experience. Are you here tonight as someone broken and burdened like Poppy was by your self-centeredness and your alienation from God? Well, Jesus knows what it is to have pain. Are you someone here tonight who feels the weight of your own inability to live up even to your own standards, let alone those of God? Well, Jesus knew what it was to suffer for the place of people like me and you, who would actually have nothing to do with him by nature. There's someone here today who knows what it is to lose a loved one. Jesus weeps at the side of a tomb of a friend. Do you know what it is to be let down by people? Well, Jesus knew what it was to be betrayed. Do you know guilt and shame? Jesus knew what it was to be born into scandal, to be held up and mocked even at the moment of his death. Do you know what it is to be human? Well, God does too. It is an audacious claim that God came as us, that he came as us for us, that he came for us with us, and that he came so that we who would reject him might come home. You know, Poppy spoke about her own first understanding of what it is that Jesus did. It's just hinted at on this page. And John, throughout the rest of his book, is going to flesh out why Jesus came. You can see the words, though, he uses to hint at it, just there in little number 14 down at the bottom. The Word became flesh, we've already read that, and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Now, I wonder what pops into your head when you hear the word glory. Maybe it's Usain Bolt smashing world records for fun. If you're a South African here, it might be Siya Kolisi holding up the World Cup. If you're someone who desires a high-flying academic career, glory may be the partnership in the Magic Circle law firm. Whoever we are, glory tends to be shiny, happy, bright, powerful, something that makes us look good in the eyes of people. If you wanted to do this, and you could track the word glory right through this little book. You could do it online if you wanted. And you'd find a surprise. Because the highest moments of glory is the point at which Jesus dies on a cross. That Jesus, being full of grace and truth, as John insists, is Jesus taking my sins, my failures, my self-centeredness, the things that only mean I deserve God's judgment. Jesus, in love, takes those things and dies in shame and in pain, taking literally hell on his own shoulders. And John says that's glory? How does that work? Well, it's because of who God is. It's because of why he sent his Son. It's because of how he has ordered reality. You see, we've come on a fair old journey even in a short bit of time tonight, and it's time for us to wrap up very soon. But we've seen that there are hints that there is a God who made us, that there's more than just this world. We've seen that there is evidence that there is someone who stepped into history to do what we could not do. But we've not yet seen the meaning that this leads to. Why did Jesus come? Why did he step in? Because, he stepped into pain and shame, as we have already said. He steps into a world in little number 5 that is dark, that wants nothing to do with him, that is morally, spiritually, emotionally in the pitch black. In little number 10, we're told that the world did not recognize him. It's an understatement. The world killed him. But he came for the most staggering reason. He came to give a meaning that makes sense of all of our desires, that makes sense of all of our failings because it deals with them. Look down with me at verse 12. He says that to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name. That's just sort of a jargony phrase for those who trust that Jesus really is who he says he is and does what he says he does. To those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. Many of us, I guess, are currently on a quest for meaning. Recently up in St. Andrews, the church that I have the great privilege to be part of, did a survey of our town and asked people, what is your biggest question if there were a God? The number one question from 20-year-old students from America in St. Andrews to 15-year-old schoolgirls in one of the most deprived towns just south of us. The biggest question everyone was asking was, what is the point of life? Why am I here? What have I been made for, if you use that sort of language? Where am I headed? Well, John says that God's goal is that people would believe in Jesus and become his children. Not his enemies, not even his servants or his slaves. Not people who create meaning for themselves by force or by might, by the perfectionism of a poppy, or the despair that may be in your own heart, or the moral goodness that you think is within you. None of those things are where meaning is found. Meaning is found in being a child of God. As I say that, I know that there'll be folk here with very different experiences of fathers. You may not know your father. You may, and I mean this in all seriousness, wish that you didn't know your father. You may have an uncomplicated childhood. Whoever you are, God is a perfect father. He is the one who in love sends his son. That comes up later in this book. And he says to any who would believe in Jesus, you can be my child. The whole sweep of human history coming together so that people may know Jesus, may receive him, may believe him. Now, if all that sounds just madness to you, let me say that is fine. On one level, it's a great thing to be skeptical and to think, and I'd love you to come and press me afterwards. I'll be around to talk. Chat to the friend who brought you. But on another level, if you think that's madness, I want to say, well, hang on, that's not fine. And with all the cheek of anonymity I mentioned earlier, but more than that, with even just the authority of one page of this account of Jesus, I'd urge you, I'd invite you, I'd encourage you to take this up and see what you make of Jesus yourself. You see, Jesus invites everyone to believe in him. He calls everyone to believe in him. Even at times, he commands people to believe in him. And so already in this week, even though it's the first night, I want to ask you a question. Who do you say that this Jesus is? And will you accept him? Will you believe in him? You know, for many, that may be a million miles away from where you're at. And we're just honored that you're here. Please think these things through. To you, I would say that hearing this call of Jesus may well look like, for the very first time, reading about him in a historical document as a thinking adult, not through the lens of a resented Sunday school or trying to keep up just that which is done back home, but as someone who's got time and who's got gifts mentally. Will you consider who Jesus is? You know, these are free for you to take away, and I'm absolutely certain that any of your mates would love to talk with you, or myself, or one of the guys or girls in a vision top. But would you do that? Would you consider that? Be skeptical of your skepticism and see for yourself who Jesus is. And it may well be, though, that there are some here tonight for whom the invitation to believe in Jesus is actually one that you're ready to act on even this evening. You might say, yeah, actually, I've been thinking about this man. I'm persuaded that he is who he said he is, that there is a meaning beyond the confines of this world, that actually, though we are a pale blue dot in the scale of interstellar space, there is a God who made us, who loved us, who came for us, who died for us, that even I might become a child of God. If that's you, if you're ready to turn back to God, I just want to invite you to do so even this evening. What I'm going to do now will seem a little bit weird, but I'm simply going to slowly say a prayer. A prayer is just speaking to God. I'm going to do it like this just to try and remove any awkwardness. There's no desire to make a spectacle of anything, no invitations down the front, nothing you may have seen in a film or heard about or been worried about. It's simply, if you wish to talk to the God who made you, to say sorry to the God who you rejected, and to say thank you for the gift of his Son, who came for you, if you would have him. I'm simply going to say the words. If you'd like to echo them quietly in your heart, please do so. But let me say that if you do pray this prayer, then your experience is that of poppies. Your emotions might come and go and they'll change, and I'm not saying that following Jesus is easy. We'll think about that as the week goes on. It's not always at all. But your world will change. Your reality will change. Your vision will be not only expanded, but altered. Because suddenly the world is no longer with you at the center, but with the God who made you. So I'm just going to say those words. Do echo them quietly in your heart. And if not, just listen in and ask, could it be true? Why might someone do this? Heavenly Father, I thank you that you have made all things. And I thank you that you have made me and this world in which we live. I am sorry, though, for the ways in which I have turned from you and the way in which I have placed myself at the center of reality and sinned against you. Thank you for the gift of Jesus Christ, your Son, the Word made flesh, who died for me. And please help me to believe in him, to receive him, and to follow him. For I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Guys, you listened enormously patiently. I sincerely hope that it's been a fun and an intriguing evening, perhaps a compelling one, as we said at the start. Just before I hand back to our hosts, I'd love to just invite you to, after this, stay and chat, to think through what you might want to do with what you've heard. Please do come and find me. I'm delighted to talk about anything, and I hope my shoulders metaphorically are big enough to take pushback, and I'd love to talk with you. If there's anything in tonight that you want to push, you want to disagree with, you want to knock around further, and please do come back to anything that's on this week. We would just be more than delighted to welcome you in, to hear you out, and to talk things through together. But thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Just to reiterate what Hamish said, we would love for you to consider who Jesus is this week, and we would really encourage you to look at the claims of the Bible for yourselves.
Yeah, definitely. As Hamish said, if you've come with Christian mates, please do ask your questions to them. They'd really love to chat with you about it. Also, as he said, please just chat to Hamish, chat to Lou, myself, or anyone in a vision jumper. We'd really love to talk it through with you. Also, if you just want to get in contact with us more generally as a Christian Union, we've got QR codes in the magazines. But again, if you're not into all that techie stuff, then please just do what I do and just go and chat with someone. Yeah, we'd really love to talk it through with you.
Yeah, and if you've been struck by what Hamish has said tonight, we have an event called The Search that follows Vision Week. So we're just going to watch a short video explaining that. Incredible. So the search is an opportunity just to find out a little bit more about what the gospel says about Jesus in small groups with cake and coffee, and that was cathedral. I think that was shot in. There are free books and people to speak to about this in the back at the cafe. Yeah, and the dates and times are in the back of your magazines, so definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, so do really think about the search. But that concludes this evening. So thank you so much for coming. The cafe's open at the back. So please do go into the cafe, spend some time there if you want to chat with your mates, chat with any of us. But there's free books out there from the bookstall, from the search. So please do go and pick one of them up. Also, all of the resources on your seats are yours to keep. They're a gift from us at the Christian Union to you. Please take them. Please take the Gospel of John. And that's it for the evening. So thank you so much again for coming, and we hope you have a great rest of your evening.